How do you get the best letters of recommendation? Well, number one is get to know your professors and start early. Oftentimes you haven't decided a major your first year as an undergraduate, but certainly by your sophomore year, you ought to have made some connections. If you're waiting later than that, it's going to be tougher. So you're going to have to really work hard if you don't decide you're going to major in psychology, or you're not going to go into graduate school, let's say, until your junior or your senior year. By your senior year, it's generally too late. You're going to have to do something else. You're going to have to take a gap year or do something to make sure that you have everything you need. But I didn't change my major to psychology. I was a zoology major originally, and I changed my major in my junior year. But I had to work really, really hard, and I worked with a lot of faculty in the psychology department, and got on different labs and worked diligently with them afterwards. So the earlier you start, just simply the better. Talk to your professors. Do not sit in the back of the room and stay quiet. We won't know who you are. We won't know anything about you. We know you're the quiet person in the back of the room, or we might not even know who you were. If you go to a large university where every class is huge, they won't know you. They'll know you got an A, but that's on your transcripts. That's not all that helpful for them to say, yes, this was an A student. Now, they could elaborate on it. They could say things like, this was an A student in one of the hardest classes that you can possibly take. And, so I can see that they're really, they clearly studied hard. They had to have a great background before they could do it. So you can puff it up so that it makes it look and sound better, but ultimately it will be thin, because you're not going to be able to talk about, leadership skills and social communication skills and written language skills, because you didn't have any writing in there. You didn't have any presentation classes. So make sure that you get to know your professors as much as possible. Seek out their advice. Go to the office hours. Schedule time with them. Tell them that you're really interested in the field of psychology and you'd like to schedule a time to come in and talk to them about their experiences in the field. Those are the kinds of things that allow the professor to then ask you questions about you, find out about your background, your interests, and those kind of things. Notice I've got do not be overly fawning or obsequious, also called brown nosing. Don't suck up too much, in other words. It's okay to say, I've really enjoyed your classes. I've learned a lot, and I really am interested in your ideas about the profession, and I'd like to share some of my ideas with you and where I would think about going and some of my goals, and get some advice from you. That's a fine thing to say. To go in and say, you're the best ever, and I love everything that you do, and I'm excited constantly to come to your class. Don't be too much. Don't be over the top, because it'll sound like you're buttering us up in order to then ask us to write you a letter. And certainly don't do that and then say, oh, and by the way, I want you to write me a letter. You should have established this way ahead of time, so that by the time you come in to ask us to write you a letter, it's a natural, it's just a natural flow. I would expect that you would come to ask me, because we've talked so much in the past. You've taken a couple of my classes. There's enough interaction that when you finally say, I'm applying to graduate school and would you be willing to write a letter for me, that I'm thinking, of course I would, because that's just a natural extension of everything we've talked about and worked about. So I'm kind of, expecting that from you. Now, take small classes. The small classes, and you go, wait, that's for letter writing? Yes, because remember, in small classes, I can remember you. So I'm teaching a summer class, and in that summer class, I've got 13 people in the class. Well, I know all of their names. I've talked to every one of them. I know a little bit about what they would like to do. I know some of their goals. I know what they're majoring in. And in that particular class, because it's a small class, we have both writing and oral presentations in the class. So I actually get a chance to see, what are their writing skills? How good do they do at a literature review? So I can see how they're able to gather information, they're able to research an issue, and they're able to then present that logically, both in writing and orally to the class. Well, that is really good for writing letters of recommendation, because that means I can speak to a lot of these topics that are important for graduate school, like how well do you write and how well do you talk to others and present. Really important skills. I can do that if you've taken a small class with me where I've had that. So take those kinds of classes. They also help you just with your general writing and oral presentation skills, which are vitally important. But for letters of recommendation, they're really good for giving me lots of information that is important to put on a letter of recommendation. Join a research lab, preferably in psychology, but if it's in biology or anthropology or something like that, that's fine too. Make sure that you understand research, how to do research, and you're doing day-to-day research lab things, such as running participants during the lab, establishing some protocols, any of those kind of things that show that you have that experience. The other reason is for the letter of recommendation, meaning that if I'm running the lab, I'm going to be able to write a good letter of recommendation for you because I can tell how you work in groups, how well you follow directions, how well you're able to take, a leadership position, how well you're able to, be determined and follow through with everything that you need to follow through. I can write about that. In larger universities, what will end up happening is you may end up working more with a graduate student rather than the actual professor. But that's okay too, because it'll be the graduate student who will probably write that letter of recommendation signed by the professor. But that's how you get known, and it's important. Joining honor societies or other groups, any of those kind of things, especially if you can be in a leadership role, is great. If it's in a university, there'll often be a faculty member or somebody who's assigned to that honor society, and they can see what you're doing and how much effort you put into it. Again, they can answer leadership roles. They can answer collaboration. They can answer how well you work with others, talk to others. What are your social skills like? They can do all of those things if you're getting a letter from one of them. Volunteer on both on-campus things and local, typically not-for-profit, nonprofit social services agencies. Sometimes they can be other. That doesn't mean they have to be that, but the advantage of doing it that way of working with those agencies is that they're usually in need of people, so they'll allow you to do a little bit more. And that means when they write those letters of recommendation for you, they're going to be able to write about more things that you're doing in those agencies. And it is absolutely okay to get a letter of recommendation. Since you're usually going to need 3 of them, it's okay to get one off campus from something like that, from a professional services agency, especially social services, psychological agency, counseling services, any of those kind of things, child protective services, any of those kind of things allow you to have experience in that field. And then you're having somebody who then has seen you providing those kinds of services, writing you a letter.